Following on from Zendikar Rising, Kaldheim is fleshed out with a series of web fiction stories. This time boasting 10 installments rather than 9, Kaldheim's narrative seems to be a clear launchpad for a story thread that will hopefully span years. But with such a densely realised plane and the introduction of several new characters, is the story we've been presented with enough to do it all justice? Welcome to Magic the Flavouring, the Magic the Gathering podcast, where we talk about all things Magic flavour design and lore. I am your host, Andy Mann.
Hello, this is Nathan Cancel.
And today we are going to be talking about the Magic the Gathering Kaldheim story episodes, the web fiction, which has returned again. And as we said in the previous episode, they're keeping up with their commitment to doing more consistent storytelling and more accessible storytelling as well, which is cool.
Yeah, that accessible part's really key. Really key. Like the fact that it's very easy to jump in and out of these stories without having to buy a hardback book or commit to 200 odd pages. Yeah, very good.
Yeah, and it's listeners, long-time listeners of this podcast will know that, especially for me personally, I was never against those ebooks, and in fact, I was one of the people that was kind of keen to see how it would go and was kind of bought full into it, literally and figuratively. But now this second round of web fiction has kind of proven to me, in my own personal intake of this content, that actually, the web fiction is a really nice place for these stories to sit. So yeah, cool. Glad we're back, and this time we've got more of it as well.
Yeah, how many did we get for Zendikar Rising? Was it 4?
Oh, do you know what? I thought it was 4. I am going to literally... I've got the story section up in front of me. I will literally just look now because I thought it was 4.
Yeah. I know we had the 4 side ones. We had the 2 ones of Akiri and Zareth, and then you had the 2 pre-con commander ones, right?
We've got... so we had 4 side stories, but we did still have 5 main stories, whereas in this one we get 5 and 5. So yeah, still correct. So we still did get more. I thought it was more. And yeah, so we're getting more of it, which is cool. Let's see them start doing now the one shots and the one offs and doing like 3 episode story arcs like in between sets, like they did with Vivian on Ikoria, right?
The one we had no idea was coming. God gave us an entire continent away from one. Imagine if we got like a side story from Kaldheim from one of the realms that we didn't see. 1, that would be very confusing for most people, but 2, I'd be quite excited to see.
Yeah, I love it. Cool. Today we're going to be talking about the main story predominantly. Well, obviously, we do have 5 episodes in the side story, and it also follows the journey of Nico Aris, who's the new Planeswalker. So we will talk about that a little bit. But mostly in kind of comparing the 2 kind of styles of storytelling and sort of seeing where the story can kind of fit and go, because they are very different in their feel and execution, the main stories and the side stories. I'm liking that they've kept up the 2 tracks. There are still downsides, and I think we mentioned this when we did our Zendikar review, that there are downsides to doing main story, side story, and I know it was something that you weren't 100% keen on. I think I was a bit more keen on than you. I may have soured on it slightly, but there are still some major positives. So we'll kind of get into that. But we will be focusing on the main story first. I'm going to go through, like I did with the Zendikar, and attempt, in an effort of great hubris, to condense all 5 of the main stories into like 20 bullet points that I'm just going to blitz through. So if you haven't read the Kaldheim stories yet, this may not be the episode for you to listen to. I would go out and read those because there is some great storytelling and some pretty big reveals as well. And this is a fully spoiled discussion, so we're not going to be holding anything back. I know we did a little bit in our previous episodes where we were talking about the set, and we didn't really want to touch on the story at all. This is going to be touching completely on the story. I'm going to go through a complete breakdown of the main story now, and then we'll be discussing it openly. So if you haven't read them yet, do go and read them, especially the main stories, because we'll be covering that in depth. But we will obviously be touching on the side stories, and then come back to this episode.
This is Kaldheim Prismatic Abridged.
Yeah, exactly. Unless you're one of those people that that watches things like the Everything Wrong With series on YouTube for films they haven't seen yet, which I've done in the past and I've regretted it.
Yeah. There's something you can't see it. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think Everything Wrong With has ruined films for me in general. Like, I now can't look at films without a critical eye and just being like, well, that doesn't make sense. And why would you do that? Why is this prop still here? Continuity error. So yeah, go doing it for films you haven't seen yet that you really want to. Don't do that. Feel free to pull apart things like what was the recent one? Not Hunchback of Notre Dame. That's a fucked up film, and it's got a very stupid ending, and I hadn't realised until very recently.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so here we go. I'm going to try and do this in under like 5 minutes. I think I gave myself last time, and I think I did it. So here we go. So right, Kaldheim story. The main story opens up to find Planeswalker Kaya, who we last saw at War of the Spark. She finds herself on the realm of Bretagard, on the plane of Kaldheim, traveling with Inga Runeyes and some of the Omen Seeker clans to hunt a beast. She's been sent to this clan, in her own words, by an unknown benefactor who's paying her to go and hunt down a beast that's been reportedly terrorizing people on Bretagard. So Kaya is still kind of in this mercenary space. She's still accepting payment for jobs, even though she's kind of on this hero's path since War of the Spark, because she did officially join the Gatewatch. They discover the beast on the realm of Bretagard to be none other than Vorinclex, who is the Phyrexian creator. Although Kaya doesn't know this, the Phyrexians still aren't known completely throughout the multiverse, so Kaya doesn't understand what this beast is, but we know it to be Vorinclex, and Vorinclex is doing some pretty gruesome shit. Olrund reveals himself after a battle ensues between Vorinclex and the Omen Seekers. Olrund is the leader of the Scoti gods, and he's been traveling with them under the guise of being just another Omen Seeker, but he reveals himself after the battle is over to be this god, and sends Kaya on a quest to hunt down the Phyrexian, because Olrund realizes that this will not be good for Kaldheim, for this beast to kind of be roaming around willy-nilly. He lends Kaya Cosima's ship. Cosima is another one of the Scoti gods and has a longboat that can traverse the cosmos, which, as we've discussed in previous episodes, is like the kind of space between the realms on Kaldheim. Vorinclex seems to have left Bretagard, although people aren't quite sure how he was able to do that, and so the ship is going to take Kaya to the next realm where Vorinclex is meant to be. Kaya ends up on the realm of Notvold, which is the troll realm, and discovers the trickster god Valky rousing a bunch of trolls in an impassioned speech, although she understands that this is a bit of an odd thing to see, and she finds out that Valky is in fact the planeswalker Tibalt. She's never met Tibalt. Tibalt's never met Kaya, but obviously due to her workings with the Gatewatch, and I think this is after the events of the Chandra comics, which Chandra fights Tibalt in those comics. So Kaya knows Chandra, Chandra's told her about Tibalt, and a battle ensues. Tibalt escapes to another realm using a very strange sword that kind of gives off an aura of the gods. We know this to be the Sword of the Realms, or the Tyrite Sword, as it's called on the cards as well, but Kaya doesn't know what this is yet. Kaya then seems to fight with a bunch of the larger version of the trolls, who are the kind of, each realm has two clans for each of the races, so she ends up getting into a battle with the larger of the trolls and has to be saved by Tyvar, who is the elf prince of Skemfar, the elf realm, and is also a planeswalker, it turns out, although he doesn't know what a planeswalker is and doesn't understand what Kaya is going on about when she accuses him of being a planeswalker. She realizes he's a planeswalker, by the way, because she spots a talisman from the plane of Zendikar and not from Kaldheim, whereas Tyvar thinks that thinks that Zendikar is just another realm in Kaldheim, which is why he doesn't understand what a planeswalker is. We take a quick break in the story to hear Tibalt's master plan told to us through the kind of format of a saga. So the whole story itself is just a saga, and we kind of find out that Tibalt essentially wants to use the Sword of the Realms to open up a bunch of open paths and doom scars between the realms to cause chaos. That's kind of his whole thing. We find out in this story as well that he is under the sort of oppression of what we assume to be Phyrexians. I think we'll talk about that a little bit later as to what we think that is. I think it's pretty certain that they're Phyrexians. So Tibalt was sent to Kaldheim to mess some shit up, which he does. He kind of claims that he would have done that anyway. But yeah, that's what he's there to do. We then jump back to the story with Kaya and Tyvar. Kaya and Tyvar have followed Tibalt to the realm of Imistrum, which is the demon realm. Immediately, they get attacked by some demon berserkers, and a battle ensues. After the battle is over, they find Tibalt rousing up a big demon fleet. So the sort of 3 or 4 demons they fight was just one little skirmish party, and they find that an entire armada of demon ships are about to travel through a huge omen path, which is essentially the Doomscar, and they see that Tibalt is the one that's caused all of this and are sending all the different races through the Doomscar. They accost Tibalt again. Another battle ensues, and during this battle, we sort of see a bit of Tibalt's fighting prowess and some more of his powers, but eventually they wrestle the Sword of the Realms away from Tibalt, and then Tibalt pieces out, planeswalks to a different realm after taunting Kaya and Tyvar. Kaya and Tyvar then use the sword to travel to Bretagard and start warning all of the human tribes about the impending Doomscar, and to try and kind of bring everyone together to fight this menace. And a giant battle ensues at this point, called the Battle for Kaldheim, in which the Doomscar opens up, and basically a huge force of mainly giants, Draugr, elves, demons, Valkyries, all kind of mush together and start fighting, kicking the crap out of each other. Coma the World, the Cosmic Serpent, or the Cosmos Serpent, also shows up for a hot minute, which is reflected in the side stories as well, which we'll talk about a little bit later. And basically, it's all just pandemonium. The action of the battle revolves around Halvar, the god of battle, defending a bridge between the Doomscar and a prominent village on Bretagard, and he's trying to defend that against hordes of Draugr and all kinds of nonsense. Kai needs to get the sword to Halvar so Halvar can shut up the Doomscar. With the help of Harold, who's king of the elves and Tyvar's brother, and with the help of Tyvar and the new planeswalker Nico Aris, who also shows up with a bunch of Valkyrie angels, Kai is able to kill the demon Varagoth, who is the kind of leader of the demons on Nimistrum, who's kicking the crap out of everyone on Bretagard, and she manages to get the sword to Halvar. Halvar closes up the Doomscar, and although there's still a bit of chaos going on, there's still some rampant Draugr and giants going around Bretagard and messing stuff up, the main body of the story kind of comes to a close. And everyone rejoices, yay, day is saved. Kai does cool stuff. Then Kai and Nico Aris kind of have a little powwow along with Tyvar about their status as planeswalkers, because Nico Aris is still a relatively new planeswalker as well. And that whole little story thread gets seeded, and we're left on a little bit of a cliffhanger. We then get an epilogue on the very last episode. We get just another little sort of 500-word epilogue, and we see that Vorinclex, because his story thread got completely buried amongst all the Tybalt stuff, which at the time, and this we'll talk about this a lot later on, but at the time I was like, well, that was a whole bunch of nothing, wasn't it? But they did hook back round. So we do see Vorinclex, and we see that Vorinclex is in the sort of Sanctum of the World tree, where the god Eskia, who is another one of the Scoti, she makes the Tyrite tree sap cosmic elixir, which gives the gods their power. So this is kind of the source of all the gods' power, and basically the purest source of Tyrite, which is the sap from the world tree. It also allows people to travel through the cosmos, and it's just a very powerful substance. We see that she is dying. She doesn't understand who Vorinclex is, but she can kind of tell that he's not of the plane. And we see that Vorinclex, far from being the mindless, attacky brute that we've come to know him as in other stories, and indeed in this story arc, very meticulously collects a sample of the Tyrite tree sap and then communicates to another, presumably Phyrexian voice on the other side of a portal, and he disappears with the sample of the Tyrite, presumably leaving Eskia to her death, which she didn't understand could happen. And that's the main story. There's quite a lot going on here. Most of it outside of the main narrative. There's lots of little offshoots going off. And this is very clearly, at least to me, I don't know whether you think it maybe started with Zendikar Rising, but this to me seems like the very start of the next big story arc in Magic the Gathering. So yeah. What do you think?
It's kind of funny how they bookend the entire story with Phyrexian flavoring almost, isn't it? It's like a little condiment to the rest of the story. Because we'll talk about, I guess, Phyrexians in a little bit, because that's a whole like bit of speculation and piecing bits apart. But what I liked about this was it kind of was a little microcosm version of War of the Spark, where you have all these different factions all having to kind of fight with and against each other in some great booming battle, which I think was handled very well. And the lead up to it kind of gave us enough background on the plane, a little bit about how the gods interact with mortals. We get a little bit of characters we've seen in the side stories. Obviously, we've seen them in the cards as well. Like, it ticks a lot of the boxes for the let's have a little war, shall we? You know, like it feels very. I hate to use analogs like this, but it felt very Lord of the Rings. You know, it had its parts that felt like Mordor. It had parts that felt like the Battle of the Pelennor Fields. It felt very synonymous to that kind of style of writing, and because obviously it's a very successful book, I think it works, and I think it worked quite well.
Yeah, a lot of not all of them, it must be said, but a lot of Magic stories revolve around planes either being destroyed or being on the verge of being destroyed, and the different races on the plane coming together to fight a thing. This one, it has to be said, felt a lot more natural than other times we've got this. Like, I mean, the last time we kind of saw this, I think, on a mass scale, other than War of the Spark, was maybe Shadows over Innistrad, Eldritch Moon, where all of the different kind of races, even the races of the night, had to come together to fight off Emrakul from the plane. And that felt okay, but also it was just like, oh, okay, because they're fighting Eldrazi, whatever. Whereas this felt a lot more internal because it's to do with Tybalt's kind of trickery in behind the scenes rather than the big overlooming threat of Emrakul on the plane of Innistrad. So I kind of liked it. Roy Graham was the writer for the main set of 5 stories with contributions from Jenna Helland, the amazing Jenna Helland, who I don't think gets anywhere near enough credit for Magic Story and world building. Like, she is a pivotal figure in Magic Story. And yeah, you can definitely feel her influence here. I really liked it. I thought the writing was really good. I've put down in my notes here, like, thank God Roy Graham is really good at writing fight scenes.
Yeah.
Because there's a fuck ton of them. Like,
Yeah.
every episode there's a fight scene, which I kind of got a bit bored with and was a bit eye-rolly. But because the writing was so good, I kind of forgave it. And I think that forms the basis of a lot of my opinion on this set of stories, was that it was a lot of fun, it was pacey, and the writing was really good, which kind of smooths over a lot of times where I was like, well, okay, we've kind of seen this story be told, right?
Yeah, I think that was the biggest thing for me, was the pacing felt perfect. None of the stories dragged necessarily. I got to the end of each one and be like, oh, okay, I guess. And it wasn't like a disappointment of, oh, that was really short. It was like, oh, okay, I was kind of along for the ride there. I could have got I didn't mind reading a little bit more, but I still think they got enough in those individual stories. I think the troll one maybe was a little bit lacking in density. I think there could have been a bit more, because it was the only real interaction we got between Tybalt and the other 2 planeswalkers, and I thought it was a really good opportunity to kind of give us some backgrounds of Tybalt that wasn't that weird middle story that just kind of explained what he was doing with this douchey tongue-in-cheek kind of I'm the narrator now kind of voice. I think at times the story was maybe, as I say, lacking with a little bit of depth, and I think that again was carried very well by the fact that the writing was tight and the pacing was tight. I think then when you look back and dissect, I think there was a lot of maybe missed opportunity. But yeah, I think for this kind of story, when you've got a lot to try and pack in, you've got to kind of get the main story points in and give enough of a hint of an overarching story and an overarching world. It's going to be impossible to get everything in it, right? Like, I mean, this is one of the concessions we have to make to web fiction, of you only have so much you can fit in compared to like an ebook or something where you can give a bit more flounce, you can take your time a bit more, and you can fluff up everything a bit more. I think that was quite noticeable in these 5 stories. I think there's a lot of things that was like, oh, well, maybe we could have seen this. Like, we didn't. There's, I think, 3 different plays we didn't really get to see any. Stop playing. Sorry, rounds. We didn't really get any kind of hint or look at. I think that's fair enough when it's balanced out with the side stories. But if you're looking at this in a contained 5 story arc, maybe there's a few things like, well, who the fuck are these Valkyries? Where did they come from? And what the fuck? What do you mean? There's a giant serpent? You know, like, if you don't have the context of the other stories, I think maybe in isolation these 5 stories might not read as well. But that's like a petty gripe, as I say. Like, when the pacing and the writing itself, like, and the content was quite tight, I think there's only so much you can do.
Yeah, for sure. Something I was really impressed with Roy Graham's writing, and it's something that I think has gotten, that it was the same in Zendikar Rising as well. I think maybe, I don't know if it's probably not intentional because it's such a personal thing for me looking at these stories. I doubt it's a big issue for anyone else. But I've often found, even in the kind of glory days of web fiction, a lot of the time the voice of the characters on the plane and the planeswalkers sounded way too colloquial. Like, this is still high fantasy. Like, and I know maybe not every plane fits into that so well, but it's not like people with, like, I sometimes found planeswalkers, for example, using very like modern Western slang. Like, Chandra is terrible for this. Like, where they write her like she's a street tough from, like, 2011, when she's like, well, no, that's not her voice, right? That shouldn't be her voice.
Her with like a Brooklyn accent.
Yeah, I'm like, you're like, what? Why is she that? Like, no, that's not her. That shouldn't be a story. That's a personal one for me. Whereas recently, the voices of the people on the planes sounds very natural to the plane itself. Like, I believed all of the races of Kaldheim, all the characters that we met, were of the plane, even when they had more modern sort of maybe characterizations in terms of their relationship to others and whatever else. I think the voice is very true, and I still appreciated the fact that the planeswalkers sounded different to the inhabitants of Kaldheim, because that's a narrative device to make them seem that little bit more alien. Like, the language that Kaya uses wouldn't be the same sort of colloquialisms that the Kaldheim like inhabitants would use, but then that's balanced by characters like Tyvar, who is a planeswalker and is from Kaldheim, he still feels like he's from Kaldheim. And I know it's like a really personal thing, but it's something I've always found when I've read magic fiction. Something that really takes it out of me is when I see a character's voice that I'm like, well, like that's not just writing for the sake of being able to identify with that person. That's like, oh no, I could imagine my mate down the pub talking like that, and it's not a good thing. Like that's ridiculous. Like, why would they talk like that?
Yeah, the
So I think I was very impressed
disassociation.
with these stories. And as you say, like the Kaldheim is so dense, and we didn't get to see a lot of it, even in the side stories, which should have acted just like the other side of the coin to the main story in terms of telling the stories that you couldn't tell in the main narrative. We still didn't get to see a whole lot. We were in Brettigard for 2 of the stories. We went to Notvold to see the trolls in 1. Then it was a saga with Tybalt, which wasn't anywhere. It was just Tybalt doing his thing. Like, there was a passing reference to the dwarves because the Tyrite sword was made by Cole, who's the master forger of the dwarves, but we saw nothing else of the dwarves or anything. Then we were in Imrastrom, and then we were back to Brettigard. It was like, there's 10 realms.
Yeah.
And reading the side stories, I expected to then go to the other, say, sort of 5 or 6 realms that we didn't go to. But we didn't. We were on Brettigard for like 2 of them. And I was like, oh, all right then. Like, we were with the Valkyries for another 2. And then you've got the elves and Istvel, and you're like, right, cool. Not one mention of Lityara.
Yeah, which is annoying because that's one of the most interesting notes. We got nothing, nothing of them whatsoever. Yeah, that's the biggest, I think, letdown is the lack of representation, which I know it's like I sound really stupid in a story that has primarily a non-binary character and a black woman planeswalker in. Like, that's obviously picking at real world compared to like the fantasy world, but it is a shame when certain planes that if it is you're super excited about, like you've presented all these 10 realms, someone's going to have that realm be their favorite and you've completely omitted that from the story. So for that person, then you've lost maybe a little bit of brevity in terms of that person, that the Vorthos of that person died a little that day,
Sure.
Like, so it was a disappointing in that regard.
I think though it goes back to what we were kind of saying a little bit earlier, where the writing was so good. It's not the writing or the stories, and it's a really kind of bittersweet thing because these stories are really good and they're really tight. But I think the main issue is, and this is something we've spoken before, even when the web fiction wasn't back and it was just like the ebooks or even just like passing story, like lore slides, whatever the fuck it is that this is a symptom of condensing whole sets into one set block structures. If you look at something like Tarkir or Ravnica, Ravnica's a really good way to kind of compare it to, rather than Tarkir, where we had 10 guilds, just like the 10 realms, and we've made this comparison quite a lot over the past few weeks. We didn't see all 10 guilds in one glut of 5 stories. We saw them across 15 stories, across 3 different sets. Or even 10 stories between 2. If you look at the Slice of Life stories from the latest Ravnica sets, Ravnica Allegiance and Guilds of Ravnica, they literally focused on one guild per story. That was their purpose. And although you don't necessarily expect them to do that here with focusing on each one plane, that gave them space to not have to kind of go, well, all of our characters that are relevant are one of these 3 tribes, so we have to focus on them.
Yeah,
so
sure.
I think this is something that moving forward, if they keep just sticking to this one set block structure, which is exhausting for a whole myriad of reasons, and has its upsides as well in others, I think the story is gonna continue down this track, which is a shame because the world building is so deep. It's so deep for Kaldheim, and we've barely scratched the surface.
Yeah, the fact they did 10 realms, I think, is probably their biggest mistake here. Is that yes, okay, you that formulaic approach of Ravnica doesn't work in every plane, and they don't tend to do it with every plane specifically because it works in Ravnicas. They've got a set structure. It's known to the players' minds. It's very easy introduction to guilds if you haven't seen them before, and it's very easy to kind of develop that ground as you go back again. I think the issue we had here is that we had a story in the middle that was told from the point of view of Tybalt, that you didn't see him interact with the Draugr. We didn't see his actual interaction with the God of Lies. We didn't see that whole and this is, I think, indicative of everything we're going to talk about in terms of like Planeswalker perspective, is that everything from that story wasn't from a world building point of view, it's from a character gloating point of view. It wasn't even character building because we already knew about Tybalt. We already know this, and though we haven't heard him voice very much, And I think that's something that people really wanted. I don't know if it's going to necessarily deliver to those people, because we didn't see him being clever or conniving. It's just him saying that he did a thing. Now, I want to see how he lied to the god of lies, except for him going, can you believe that he believed his own lie? No, I can't believe it. Prove it. Like, you know, you can't just say a thing's happen. Show, don't tell. And that whole story was telling a point of view of a character we kind of wanted to feel and know more about, and it could have shown us perspectives of the other realms and given us maybe, okay, then at that point we only missed out on 2, and then it's very easy to kind of fill in a bit of a backstory maybe a couple of months down the line, or when we go back that's the focus for the next block. Fair enough, that's very easy to do. But yeah, that I think that divot in the middle, especially since it was the 3rd story, it kind of took the weight out of the momentum of the story as well, because it wasn't a point of it wasn't from the point of view of the action, it was a retrospective kind of go. It's almost like narration in the middle of a film explaining the beginning of the film. Like, that's like 101, you don't do that in films, right? So I think it kind of worked in the same way with the stories here, of where maybe that's kind of what took a bit of the wind out, and it kind of, again, that was another, I don't like using the words missed opportunity too often because it makes it seem that what we get wasn't good enough. But again, don't give us really good stuff all the time, because then when you drop the ball a little bit, maybe then we'll be able to pick out the things.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's all structural issue, isn't it? Because
yes.
I can imagine he said to Roy Graham, like, you've got 5 stories to do this story arc in, and at some point we need to have like a perspective of Tybalt telling what's happened before, basically like the prologue, which is him getting the Tyrite sword. Whereas if that was in a 2-block structure, where I'm going to pick up on Ixalan now with Alison Lurs doing the Ixalan story, where you had Ixalan and Rivals of Ixalan. Ixalan was about them all filling in the gaps of the world, introducing us to the different tribes. Not all of the stories were even about Jace and Vraska. You had some other stuff going on there with the vampires and the Sun Empire and Huatli and whatever else. And then the second half, Rivals of Ixalan, was the kind of the second and third act of the story, where now you've got all the backstory of the world. Let's let loose with the actual story of them trying to find the city of Erazka. Imagine if that was what Kaldheim had, and we had, say, the first half was Kaya chasing Vorinclex around all the different realms, and we get introduced to all the different realms, and Tyvar. Maybe we just see like one episode where it's Tyvar and Harald talking about the Einir gods and all this kind of thing. And then the second half, Rivals of Kaldheim, is all about the Doomscar battles. Like, Tybalt's plan has already been set in motion, because that's not the end of the story. Tybalt doing the Doomscar isn't the end of the story. The battle and the kind of aftermath is really the second half of that story, because Tybalt pieces out halfway through the narrative in this. So the second half is all about the different battles. We see, you know, the Karnfell, like zombies fighting the spirits on Istfell. We see the gods getting involved, and there's a lot more space. And in that, we could maybe have snippets of non-linear storytelling where Tybalt tells a group of trolls that he's met about how he stole the sword from Cole, and he can actually tell the saga in the story, and we get to see snippets of Valky and this, that, and the other. There's just a lot more space, and that's, I think, what the side stories are there for, is to add that space. In the side stories, we got 2 whole sections where we followed Nico Aris, the new Planeswalker, in really well-written stories about them and their travels with the Valkyrie. They go to Starnheim, and then that dovetails into the story of the main set, because the culmination of the 2 Nico Aris stories is also the culmination of the main story as well. And so that was really nicely stitched together. And then the other 3 stories, we got to see individual little story arcs from legendary creatures from around Kaldheim, which is great. But because you're forcing that into a 1-block structure where you've got these 2 different tracks, and that's the advantage of having 2 different tracks, is you can tell different stories without them necessarily interfering, and you can also stitch them together. There's a lot of creativity. The downside is that neither one of those story tracks really gets enough room to breathe on their own.
Yeah.
You get the same amount of stories, excellent, but they don't tell the same amount of story. Not so good.
Yeah, I think it's strange that the 2 Precon Commander stories, I didn't mind it so much in Zendikar Rising, because that story, the 5-part story we got for Jace, Nahiri, and Nissa was actually quite tight, and I think that was fine. I think it was just a bit too much story to tell in Kaldheim. Again, Zendikar didn't need to do any world building. They'd already done 6 sets of world building. Was it 6 sets? 5 sets. 'Cause it was only 2 for Zendikar. Yeah, a battle for Zendikar, and then Oath of the Great Watch, right? So yeah, five sets
Too
essentially.
many.
To
Fucking
Yeah.
Zendikar.
You know what I mean? And that had a load of context. So we could just go, right, let's focus on this specific story. We didn't mind it being focused on the Planeswalkers. It's almost like how they went back. We still got a little bit of context with Akiri and how the denizens had been affected by the fallout of the Eldrazi threat. With this, we haven't really got that. Not only are you setting the groundwork whilst also fucking the groundwork up, which is very difficult to do. Here's how the plane's going, but also it's kind of at war. You know, like it's very difficult thing to balance because you don't set a norm before you upset it. And this, what I loved about 3 blocks, I'll admit, 3 set blocks is probably too much because you run out of juice by the 3rd act, and that's something that's known throughout a lot of creative writing, especially with things like plays and stuff. It's very difficult to deliver with the pacing on all 3. But this breathe in, breathe out effect you can get from a 2 block structure, I think 2 set block structure, I think is perfect. Because as you say, you have this breathe in where you take in everything about the plane, you get all of the little details, all the things that might not even matter for the second set, and then you get the exhalation, the what and how, you know, like, yes, okay, this is the status quo. Then as you say, Tibalt comes in, cuts everything up to pieces, and everything kind of gets in disarray. And by the end of it, the plane's kind of like, oh, we don't know how it's going to be going forwards. I guess we'll find out when we come back. And that's quite nice. Whereas as we had it here, we get to I guess we'll find out as we come back. It's like, wait, what? I'm not even properly understood everything yet. And you give us 2 stories based on characters that aren't necessarily integral to the current plot. Like, these are things you could do in a month's time. I mean, I know you want it to be relevant with the decks as they come out. But we don't need to know about the Aina right now. We can find out about the Aina ages. You could have done it before the set came out. You can do it in a couple of weeks' time, whatever. We kind of want the stories and as much of the screen time we've got for these 9 stories to be focused on the story being told, especially when there's not a lot of time to do so. So yeah, again, it's going to be difficult to balance. We always like complaining about these things, but obviously this is kind of supposed to be a critical response. And I think that's fair compared to the last block. I think they might have got a lot of good feedback from how they handled the Zendikar story, but this is a very different beast. You know, this is a new baby plane that we really want to get to know, and you've done a lot of world building with naturally, inherently within the set and within your Planeswalkers guide. Maybe you needed to give it a bit more time because Zendikar didn't need that. If anything, Zendikar, everyone was kind of bored of it and went, oh, actually, you know what? I'm surprised I enjoyed another story about Zendikar. Whereas with this, it's like, I don't even have enough time to kind of like, we did find out nothing about how Nafi did things. You know, there's so many different things. As I say, like the Lityara is a good example of, well, you're like, well, are we going to come back and see this again? Now we're starting this new big sweeping story arc. It's unlikely we come back to Kaldheim for another year or so, at least. I mean, realistically. So yes, okay, it's a lot of threads left open potentially to come back to, but again, I think it was missed opportunity considering the context of the story we're telling right now needed a lot of background. It needed a lot to kind of to carry it, and it did a good enough job, but not quite enough.
Sure.
For me.
And this is all structural. This is nothing to do with the writing. I would happily read another 5 Kaldheim stories by Roy Graham. Like, the writing is really good. The product is really great. It's just it needs to just be rearranged slightly. It needs some like a hand in the mush, just kind of smoothing things over and being like, right, well, this can go over here, this can go over here.
Take time with it. Take time with it. That's maybe the issue with Kaldheim in general. It's just so much into one set. There's no time to dissect it before we're moving on to the next big shiny thing. You know,
sure.
And maybe that's indicative of the process that Magic's go through in general at the moment, which you can feel. I think most players can feel. There's an uptick in pace in everything they're doing. Story's not one of those things you can rush. You know, you can give us the most amazing story in the world, but if it's only on 100 pages, like, there's only so many words you can fit on that work and make sense. You know, and have the time to breathe. So
for sure. One last little thing, we're going to talk about some of the protagonists and kind of how their characterization is as continuing characters and new characters as well. We're going to get onto that in a minute, but I just want to talk about, this is another bittersweet kind of gripe thing, and another one of the examples of I would have been annoyed if it wasn't such good writing and if I didn't enjoy the character so much. And that's the fact that the main story is told predominantly through, bar one story, through the sort of perspective and experiences of Kaya, the Planeswalker that we met in Conspiracy, and then she came back in War of the Spark, and now obviously she's here in Kaldheim. It's a real bugbear for me personally, and I know it's something that you and I both kind of agree on this, that every story in Magic seems to have to revolve around a Planeswalker and the Planeswalker's quest specifically. Like, this is literally Kaya's quest. She's on Kaldheim because she's paid to do so, and then it's about her going around. And I'm kind of bored of it. I'm really bored of it.
She doesn't even commit to the actual thing she's there for. After the first story, she's like, "Oh no, there's a war for me to get my hands involved with." And I think in general, as a passing point, that's a lot to dissect as well. This idea of Planeswalkers' involvement in the plane, I think it's touched on quite a few angles in the story. But as you say, this could have been focused on even just Tyvar. It could have been focused on anyone else apart from Kaya, who was already doing something else. And you, the story, have got distracted from a Phyrexian bloody Praetor, which is really important to let me get involved with this war again. And I think it's funny. There may be even a bit of meta narrative in the story of where there's a few times where she even seems to question of like, why am I doing this? Why am I jumping headfirst into someone else's problems again? And as a reader, I'm like, yeah, why are you doing this? Have you forgotten about Vorinclex? Because that's kind of important. And even the story at the end goes, oh shit, yeah. Oh, by the way, Vorinclex was here. It is really bad, but I guess Kai was distracted, whatever. You know, like,
like if Kai had stopped him, this wouldn't have fucking happened.
Yeah, the amount of shit
I
that might
suppose
happen over the next year, and you're like, this is what happens when you get distracted by a hunky elf and some dwarves and some trolls. Sorry, this is what happens, Kaya. This is all on you.
I guess that's the dramatic irony, though, isn't it? That in later sort of sets will go, if only Tybalt hadn't got involved, Kaya could have maybe stopped it. It's not basically a big one. It's fairly self-explanatory, like that point of view of I'm a little bit tired of following the Planeswalkers. And if I can just compare it to Django Wexler doing the Sundered Bond, which was the Ikoria ebook, where the story wasn't Vivian's story. She was the Planeswalker on that plane. It was her kind of jumping us, the audience, onto the plane. But the story wasn't hers to follow. She kind of went with the flow of Luca's story, right? And yes, Luca turned out to be a Planeswalker because even though sparks are apparently 1 in a billion chance, every fucking character in Magic's got a spark. Even the ones that don't spark have bloody sparks. Fucking Rada. Bliss of the Traitor. So this can be done, and it was really nice in Ikoria. People like say what you will about the ebooks, like in the fact that they didn't follow along with the cards or whatever, but in a bubble, the Ikoria story was really interesting because there was this otherworldly presence of Vivian, and she would give context to Ikoria in terms of the larger multiverse, and especially when we came up against unknown Planeswalkers. But she was in the background, like she wasn't making herself another fucking Jace, where everyone's just, like, Jace is a great character, but we saw too much of him like 10 years ago, and now Chandra's doing the same thing, so people are getting bored of them. Like, she kind of kept to herself, and I hope that in future stories they just don't have it be the Planeswalker's quest every time. Like, the side stories are a great showing of that you can do individual stories and still be fine. And they used to do that as well in the web fiction. We would still follow, like in Tarkir, for example, it was still Sorin and Ugin and Sarkhan pushing the narrative forward, but we would then also get whole web fiction episodes where it was just focusing on a clan.
Yeah, exactly.
And reacting to what was going on with the Planeswalkers. So yeah, hopefully that is something that we kind of move slightly back to.
Yeah, because I guess Tyvar's the only one who doesn't get a voice, right? I mean, Kaya has her point of view, Tybalt gets his own story, Nico Aris gets 2 stories about them. Tyvar, the actual denizen of Kaldheim, who arguably might not... Thing is, I can understand from their point of view of how are we going to build the narrative for Kaya? Because there's a couple of moments here where she takes like the mentor role, which I kind of find a bit disassociating because we haven't seen her for that long. As far as I can't remember exactly how long she's been a Planeswalker for, or exactly how old she is. But I find it really strange when she turns around to an elf and says, "Hey, boy." It's like,
hey, kid. That wound me up.
This elf's going to be like maybe 300, 400 years old and is a prince. Like, I liked it when she chatted back to the gods, to Elrond, because that shows the disconnect between, I don't care what your status here on this plane is, which is its own problem anyway. I don't give a shit about your status quo. Boom, from Kaya, whatever. But there is a degree of gods might not be considered as reverence from people outside of the plane, and it kind of gives them almost this humanistic quality. If you're going to sit amongst the mortals, then you kind of have to act and respond amongst the mortals as well. Don't act like you're one of the team and then be like, actually, no, you guys do all of the work. I'm going to bounce off to this other realm, and none of you can. Don't have that kind of ambivalence, which I don't think the gods do here. And one of the things I really loved about this story is how immersed the gods are. Like, what's her name? Cosima just comes out of the river as a dolphin, transmogrifies into a woman, brings out a sword, and then Kai's response is, damn, a badass goddess then. All right, let's go. I'm like, boom, I'm pumped for this. Yeah, fantastic. Yeah. But yeah, it was felt really strange that Kaya took this almost like mentor role. Even at the end, like Nico Aris, they have like a little conversation. And Nico seems to be equally unsure about their status as a planeswalker. And it's almost like Kai goes, oh, another one to have to explain it to. And that would have been a really interesting thing to look at from Tyvar's point of view, not necessarily from Kaya's point of view. And I think some of the notes they tried to go on of being like, how does Kaya feel responsible for the plane in terms of, right, she's taken a job on and she's got, you know, responsibility at least to that, and she's not like her ethics at least hold her true to her word. But there is this bit part of her, like Tybalt has an attack when her and Tyvar fight with Tybalt at the Blood Crag. Tybalt uses this smoke that kind of infects her like mind and kind of tells, and she even comments about how it's cleverer magic than she expected out of him, and it kind of plays on her doubts and going, why are you here? Run, this isn't your responsibility. That's kind of really interesting. And I thought that was something that they didn't need to do in this story, but they didn't necessarily follow up on it too much. Like there was a hinting of it, a peppering of it. I think it is an interesting conversation because, yeah, who is Kaya to come into a plane, try and right all the wrongs? You know, like we still don't know who her benefactor was that tried to get her to go to the plane to sort out Vorinclex in the first place. We still don't know if Vorinclex has got specific intention, or if he's completely just a drone to whoever he was talking to at the end, who then also influenced Tybalt's decision. So there's all this like meddling in the background thing going on, but our personal kind of journey is all of these new planeswalkers kind of dealing with how they treat planeswalking. Like Tyvar initially is like, no, I don't care about other worlds. I can live for glory here. And then at the end he's like, wow, I mean, no one's ever going to forget who you are after what you've done on this plane, how you've saved us. So maybe I need to go and do some of that as well. Also, is it tiring that every single planeswalker needs to take it upon themselves to save the fucking multiverse?
Well, okay, so let's talk about this then, because Kaya is an interesting one, and I throughout the stories I was worried about Kaya's character, and then every time I was worried, I was kind of reassured about her character. So Kaya is a character that we've seen a couple of times, and she has evolved every time we've seen her, which is quite interesting for a narrative tied to a game, really, where people will really want to sort of make the relatable stereotypes theirs. Because if you look at things like the Gatewatch, I know they're a dead horse to be flogged now in terms of, you know, picking apart their narrative, but other than maybe Jace and Liliana, definitely, like most of them don't really have too much of a story arc. We saw Nissa getting a bit of a story arc in Zendikar Rising, which is nice, but for the longest time they were just their kind of caricatures, if you like, and it's only recently where they've started to flesh them out and maybe kind of give them a bit more room. Whereas Kaya, she's not been in every story. She's not a fan favorite planeswalker yet. She's getting there. People like Kaya, but then people like Nahiri, so fuck people.
Hey, leave Faye alone.
Every time. I'm going to mention it every time. She's a dick.
Yeah.
But Kaya's getting there. You know, they clearly want her to be the face of the game coming. She's definitely going to be a big player in the new kind of story arc. And it's interesting that they've picked an Orzhov planeswalker, and obviously I love the Orzhov, and there is a lot of duality. It's the most contrasted, you know, of all the colours I feel, and the most interesting. So her personality is kind of shining through here, but every time we've seen her, she's changed up. When we first saw her in Conspiracy, she was kind of a behind-the-scenes player. She's the assassin that kills King Brago at the behest of Queen Marchesa, and when she gets accosted by Adriana, Captain of the Guard, in that story, Adriana challenges her to duel because she's the captain of the guard and she's going to try and kill the assassin that killed her king. But Kaya is very much like, no, I wasn't paid to kill you. I'm not going to kill you. I'm just going to peace out. Like, I could fight you, but I could also run away because I can. I'm a planeswalker and I can, you know, walk through walls. So I'm going to do that instead because that's what I'm paid to do. So immediately we get this kind of mercenary with a heart trope, which you see a lot where, you know, you see like pop culture.
I'm all right assassinating the king, but I'm also too ambivalent to care about how it affects the rest of the country and civilization.
Well, because they're paid to do it, right? Because they're paid to do it. They're like, this is a job. I'm not a psychopath. I'm not doing this because I have some
I'm not crazy.
Yeah, there's a great line. There's a game called Team Fortress. Is it Team Fortress 2? I'm thinking of. I think it's that. Yeah. There's an assassin character in that, and they do like little trailers for each character. It's like it was like an early sort of battle royale game. It was like the progenitor of those games. And one of them's an assassin, a sniper, and he's on the phone to his mum, going, "No, mum, I'm not a psychopath. I'm a professional. I'm not going to kill people in like a mass like killing. I get paid to do it." And it's like it is that idea. And I think this is a trope that people are aware of. Like the kind of like Han Solo from Star Wars is the same thing. You know, he will kill to protect himself, but he's not going around like massacring people, even though you could argue he's a killer, you know, and he's out for his own interest. So this is the character we were presented with Kaya. Then we see her in War of the Spark, where she and obviously all planeswalkers get sucked onto Ravnica and they're dealing all this shit. But she gets sucked in, and it's funny you say we didn't see her in a mentor role. I suppose we did with Teo Varada and Rat, and Teo Varada being a new Planeswalker, because they kind of all teamed up in that storyline. And we saw Kaya kind of showing Teo how to handle himself in like a big battle situation. And in that, we see that Kaya is still accepting money. She gets hired by Taser to kill the Obsidat. And Kaya then becomes the leader of the Orzhova, but we see her like forgiving debts and using that as leverage against the Orzhov because she inherently finds them to be evil. She doesn't like the way they do things. So we see another little evolution of her character where she doesn't need to forgive people of their debts, but because she has a moral compass, we start seeing that fleshed out. And then after War of the Spark, she joins the Gatewatch, and we see her in Kaldheim, where she is actively trying to do the hero thing, is what she says, where she's trying to take inspiration from Gideon, from a lot of these other heroes across the multiverse, and maybe do things that are altruistic. And then those doubts that you talked about, where throughout the story she has those doubts about, well, why is she doing this? She has no allegiance to the plane. That is her old kind of, she is being paid to do a job, but the job that she's doing right now isn't what she's doing. She's off helping Tyvar in this Doomscar situation. But it is the right thing to do, maybe, if she's to do this hero thing. And I really love it. I think it's a really fleshed out narrative. The thing that I got worried about was that there were certain points in the story where I felt like they'd already speed-runned her through to the hero phase. Like she was already just willing to jump. She was willing to fight Tybalt based on the fact that Chandra was like, oh, I don't like Tybalt. He was like a shithead to me. They've never met. And yet she was still like, oh, I'm going to fuck Tybalt up and stop his plans. Like, hang on a minute. Hang on. Like, you've never met him. How do you know that that's what he's going to do? Like, it doesn't seem in character for you. But then they would pull it back in terms of like, well, she's not being paid to do it. She has these self-doubts. She comments at one point that she wants to try and find a buyer for Tybalt's head, which I liked and disliked at the same time because it seemed to me like she was still thinking like a mercenary and a killer. But also, is the difference between like a hired assassin and someone who's like a bounty hunter, like when they get paid? Like, is she going to kill Tybalt and then try and find someone to pay her for the privilege? Like, that seemed a little bit psychotic to me. But yeah, in general, I sort of felt like they kind of handled her story well, and they pulled it back. She wasn't always just, I'm superhero. She did have self-doubt and kind of self-interest, which I like, and then we'll kind of see her evolution go forwards after that, I think.
Yeah, I suppose, it's kind of interesting how she's done, again, like, time away from the story probably speaks wonders to her character, which is amazing because we don't get to see it as an audience. So so much for character growth. But yeah, it does seem a little bit that she's clearly turned a leaf, and the events that have happened within the stories that we've seen her in already have clearly affected her. Obviously, there's a bit of a break between the last time we saw her. She was saying about going back to Tolvada, which is really strange that we haven't done so. And I really want to see some context of her within her home plane because it will give us some understanding of where she comes from, whether or not we should consider her to be a bit more merciless, or have a bit more personal conviction, like without having that instinctive background, knowing that the first time we saw her was when she was shanking up some Ghost King, and then next time was shanking up some Guildmaster, some spirit guildmasters, all we've seen her do mostly is shanking, so it's kind of interesting that now, she seems to be almost this ambivalent mentor figure, which, yes, we saw a little bit in War of the Spark. I just felt it's felt slightly unwarranted with the characters we have already. Nico Aris already has a very strong voice from themselves anyway, and Tyvar, obviously being an upstart elf, wasn't necessarily going to respond to her being all high and mighty about things when she's just some random, upstart from a different realm as far as he's concerned. So maybe that interaction would have been more interesting to see from Tyvar's point of view. I think it was a missed opportunity to see a POV from him, especially since we didn't see any POV from the elves. I haven't read the latest side story, so admittedly I haven't seen how the Aina fell, and see the voice of the elves from that point of view. But beyond a little bit of Harold, I don't know, maybe we've seen too much elves and it was good to focus on Kaya, and it gives us a springboard for her journey going forwards. In retrospect, obviously we'll know better. As it stands now, was it unwarranted? I don't think so. Did it feel like a big change of pace for her? Yes. So maybe let's see how it develops going forwards.
Yeah, I mean, I like Kaya. I think she's very good. I think she's a far more interesting character to follow than, I'm going to hate mail again, than Gideon, for example.
Yes.
Gideon wasn't boring. I'm going to quickly jump in and cut myself off there. Gideon had his own hero's journey and he had his own demons to bear, but he was still very much shining Boy Scout, poster boy, chiseled jaw, White Knight, right? That
he was never
who
not
he
going
was.
out dying, right? There was always that was never in anyone's doubt, I don't think.
Yeah. And also, I find Kaya is a really nice. She still feels different to the other anti-heroes around her. If we take somebody like Vivian, Nahiri, and who was the other one I wrote down here? I wrote down. I prepared this statement about it,
I prepared and then wasn't prepared for
and then didn't look at it. Yeah.
preparation.
Oh yeah, Vivian, Nahiri, like Dak or Liliana. Like Magic's got a lot of
Yeah.
different anti-heroes or like roguish heroes who maybe aren't always out for the best interests of everyone around them. But Kaya very much feels different to all of them enough that I feel it's kind of cool. She was never malicious. Like Liliana was manipulative and vindictive. Nahiri is rage-filled. Dak is just a thief. Like you can't swing it. He might be a nice dude, but he's a fucking thief, and he'll take people's stuff. Whereas even when she's an assassin, and that is a big even because obviously just being a straight up killer for hire is not a great character trait. She seems to have a proclivity for killing spirits. Like that was kind of like her thing because she can do this phasing ghost form thing. So those were maybe the jobs that she accepted more often than not, or killing what she would thought to have been a mindless beast on Kaldheim turned out to be a Phyrexian Praetor, although she still doesn't quite understand.
Probably better to kill that, to be fair, rather than the minus beast, but yeah, no, whatever.
Yeah, exactly. So, like, even within her role as an assassin, she was never portrayed as, obviously there's dark pasts we can learn from. She was never portrayed as being particularly, like, horrible, you know. Whereas other anti-heroes have swung one way or another and have been. So she has her own voice.
Yeah, she wasn't evil in any way, I don't think.
No. I do think the mental thing is a bit odd, if only because of the way that she kind of seemed to rank on age more than anything else as well. I didn't mind her being a mentor in terms of her status as a planeswalker, but we've never gotten an idea of how old she is. As an audience member, I assumed she was actually in her early 30s. I thought she was maybe like more my age, but maybe that was just me putting that on her.
Well, no, I've had her even younger. I had her between 25 and 32, maybe. I wouldn't have put her at mid. Again, we don't know how long people technically live for as normal humans, or like how quickly you're supposed to mature. Again, we don't know a lot of her backstory about how she grew up. Maybe she matured very early. But yeah, I had her younger than like say the average, like say Gideon. I'd have had her younger than Gideon.
Maybe
I'd have had her in the same, a little older than Chandra, but not so. She seems more savvy than I'd have expected initially.
But maybe do you think, again, this is us putting that on her, as late 20s, early 30-year-olds who are like, well, we're still children, whereas, you know, maybe like 50, 60 years ago,
yeah,
like
sense.
People our age have kids and therefore literally can call people kid. So maybe that isn't the preserve of craggy old people. Maybe we should be calling people kids.
We're the problem. Yeah, of course, absolutely.
Let's talk about Tyvar a little bit, because new character. I was all set to be completely ambivalent about Tyvar because, I mean, I like heroes, I like superheroes, and I like swashbucklers, but he was just like, he was going to be geared up to be cocky. He's very, very sexy. He's got big muscles and beautiful hair.
I added a second very in there. It's like,
he is. I can't help it. Like, I thought that was going to be his character from like full stop. And that was going to be just the thing of like cocky planeswalker. Ooh, I'm Tyvar. But he was so much fun. So much fun. I really like Tyvar. And the fact that he didn't know what a planeswalker was simply because of the mechanics of his own plane is genius. I love it.
That was very clever. Very clever. I like. There was almost like the reveal as well. There was almost like this like cliffhanger. I mean, obviously it was at the end of the story where Kaya kind of goes, "And you don't even know you're a planeswalker? What?" And I don't. There was something about that realization that felt really honest. And that's the kind of interactions that I like that we get to see with planeswalkers. It's usually how they're interacting with each other and how they work with. Again, it's always metaphysics for me. The metaphysics always make me really excited, and that is such a true thing of where you didn't even realize that he planeswalk. Imagine if he planeswalked to Zendikar like middle of the Eldrazi invasion. He's like, "Holy shit! I didn't know the realms were like this. These are cosmic monsters."
Well, he would have thought they were cosmic monsters. Yeah,
right. Which who's to say he's wrong? You know, I mean, it's funny that Kaya actually specifically in this story says that the multiverse is very similar to the realms, except there aren't really these big horrible animals in between. It's like, oh, Kaya, babe, you don't even know. Yeah,
naive,
that was a
right?
really nice touch, and it's things like that I think work, and I think that's why that was a really nice, honest interaction between the two of them. And maybe that's when then she feels that thing of, well, if you don't know, shit, man. I mean, even the last few years of me being a planeswalker trying to help out with all this nonsense is actually quite a lot to deal with. And Tyvar's already kind of on his own little journey, you know. He's already had his own micro multiverse to deal with, you know. I don't know. Maybe he could have traveled between the realms before he became a planeswalker. Maybe it kind of happened at the same time. Who knows? But yeah, it was quite interesting to see this idea that he starts off with like, oh no, I'm fine with just, you know, bouncing around the realms here, and then he has his world opened up a little bit. He goes, "Oh, if this is what glory can be like, yeah, I'm
Sure.
down for it."
It's nice to sort of know that his realization in a plane. This is why Kaldheim is so well fleshed out. In a plane where stories of glory are everything, the reason he wants to stick with, staying on Kaldheim is because these stories are more relevant to him. So if he sticks on Kaldheim, he gets more glorified stories about him bouncing around the realms. Something he can do with more ease because of his Planeswalker status, sort of. Although Planeswalkers still aren't quite that savvy on Kaldheim. But then his realization at the end of the story that his deeds as a Planeswalker could echo after he's left. So he doesn't get the glory in the moment, maybe, but he knows that these stories are still worthy enough that he wants to go out and help people like Kaya has helped him.
Yeah.
Is a very nice little mini arc and kind of gives a character that he's already got an established warrior, as you say. He could be however many hundreds of years old because elves tend to live for a long time. The interesting thing about him not knowing he's a Planeswalker is because he's already sparked and gotten used to it, which is a very new way to see Planeswalkers who are still kind of babyface. Like, he's not a new Planeswalker. He's a newly realized Planeswalker. So it was a nice little character arc to introduce him and give him motivation off plane, which I thought was really cool. Something I really liked about Tyvar as well in general, and this is something I think gives us a larger insight into just how people on Kaldheim behave, is that it's noted in the story a couple of times that Kaya is surprised that for someone who is so cocky and bare-chested and sexy, that he is happy to share in the glory of her achievement and her skill. He doesn't try and he's not a competition for him per se. He is like, wow, you did this thing. Can't wait for you to tell that story. And that takes it by surprise. Because usually that means that people who are super accomplished in a multiverse of never-ending competition and fighting for survival, that is something they need to rip from you, that kind of, no, I want to be glorified. But Kaldheim, as much as people are those kind of striving for glory, the people of Kaldheim are also practiced audience members. The story is a two-way thing. You can't tell a story without people willing to listen, and only one person can tell a story at a time. So that means you're listening more than you're sagaing. So him being able to go, you did this amazing thing, I can't believe it, that was wicked, is just as enjoyable to him and to the people of Kaldheim as doing it themselves. And I thought that was a really nice little touch. And makes him different. Makes him different from other swashbucklers,
Well, exactly, yeah. It wasn't all me, self. It was like, hey, look what we did. The fact that he was just as surprised as... Because the funny thing is, we see Kaya's point of view being like, damn, look at him move. Didn't expect him to do... There's a lot of her fawning over... Not fawning, because that's the wrong way. There isn't any... emotional
which is great. There was no romantic connection between them.
But it's always every single time he does something, it's almost unexpected. And I think from an audience point of view, his abilities are very, very cool. Weirdly enough, very similar to how Vorinclex tried to amalgamate the humans at the beginning first story as well. I don't know if that's deliberate, that both of their ways of doing things seem to be quite similar. He just sinks his hand into whatever, and obviously he can transmute it, which is a very
he's a transmuter,
and I didn't expect Vorinclex to have the same kind of idea, but point being that it was really cool to see him. It wasn't just Gideon swinging his Cyril around, which obviously is part of the reason why Gideon got laughed at for so much. Tyvar's abilities are still unknown, and the way they can use them are really interesting. I also think a really nice grounding moment for him again was when he goes off. Basically, he hears the horn of the elves and goes, "That's no Draugr horn, or that's no troll horn, or whatever." And he bounces off to try and sort everything out. We don't get his point of view. All we know then is that his brother Harold, the king who united the elves, comes back over, and Kai's like, "Oh, that easy?" And Harold's basically like, "I know my brother, I know he boasts, but he would never lie." And that just actually, from another point of view, that gives Tyvar a lot of grounding. He's this young, ambitious upstart, but his older brother just goes, I know him, I know he's trustworthy, I know he's to be believed. And it kind of puts a lot of brevity to his character without having to say it out loud. That was actually a really good example of telling, of showing, not telling, and seeing the other direction. So I think for as little as we saw him, it was only 2.5 stories really, We've displayed a great use of his ability, a great grounding in terms of. Also, another point is when Tybalt's smoke was affecting Kaya and niggling on her doubts. She wonders why Tyvar wasn't affected. She goes, "Oh God, he's too young to have any doubts." It's like maybe that was a slight against his age. Again, Kaya winds your neck in. He's an elf. I think it was nice to show that he's so self-assured. He's got such confidence in himself that he couldn't possibly be like swayed from his direction, which again is another way of showing, again, it was told a little bit, but again, showing his character being a bit more well-rounded than, as you say, this two-dimensional swashbuckler.
Yeah, really cool. I can't wait for him to interact with elves on other planes. Oh my God.
Oh man, yeah, right. Yeah, we don't get that enough, to be fair. We saw it with Nissa and Lorwyn, but beyond that, I don't think we've seen too much of it.
Yeah, can you imagine if he goes to like Kaladesh and goes like, "Who are all these fucking nerds?"
But imagine him on Kaladesh with all his transmutation. See, that's the kind of thing.
Yeah.
We never saw Huatli and Sahili making these metal dinosaurs, but in my headcanon, that's still happening out there, So that's another point for
I
action.
kind of feel like I think there's a passage in War of Spark which sort of alludes to something similar. The Sahili Huatli storyline is yet to be told, and I think it will be because it's a little fanship that
they're not just going to sweep it under the Chandra Nissa carpet. I don't think they've made that mistake once already. Hopefully, we get it explained a bit more.
So yeah, Tyvar, good new Planeswalker. I don't always warm to new Planeswalkers. I mean, obviously, new characters who like it's always a toss up. But I think recently, like it's definitely been like a 50-50 coin toss between whether I warm to new Planeswalkers, and I really like Tyvar. I really liked Nico Aris as well. In their stories. Let's talk just very quickly about Tybalt. Yeah.
So much. I love that pause. That was beautiful because that is what it was. Is there's this pause of like, oh, it was so close to having enough. There's some really cool moments for him, like some really cool visualization about how he uses his magic. I didn't like the fact that he was essentially turned into a you can't stop my plan, and it wasn't even his plan from the get go. Like he was kind of forced into it through what we assume is the horrible beast being Vorinclex. We assume that he was under duress from Vorinclex to do some.
Interesting. I quite like all this stuff. That's interesting.
I think that's what I mean. This is all of the good bits. The way he actually played out in the story wasn't anything more than his 2D villainous character, and I think it's a shame that we didn't. Again, the thing that would have given him the character brevity that we needed was seeing him. Show us how he beat the Valky God of Lies. Don't just have him tell him that he was really clever. Show how clever he was, and then that forgives any kind of story arcs going forwards. Like I wanted Tybalt just to be something a little bit more interesting than a bit of a nuisance. That 5-year-old who's burning ants with a magnifying glass. I didn't get that much more from him. He drew a fucking arrow to go, hey, follow me, guys, over here. Why? Why did he need to make a molten arrow to get them to follow him? Like, what was the intention of that? I don't even know. So I think that at that point that was maybe dropped. I think everything around his story, why he was there, what he was doing, why he was doing it, that's really interesting and intriguing. And this malevolent force. There's this thing. Whenever there's malevolent forces, like the voice in the Ozolith telling Luca what to do, and this horrible beast and the disjointed voice that Vorinclex talks to, that's all really, really cool because it's like, oh, who could it be? What's going on? We don't really know. But if Tybalt's just a right-hand man to some grander scheme, it kind of just plays into that kind of meanness of his character a little bit too much.
A little bit.
He's a 7-mana fucking cosmic imposter. He should just be batted away and then goes, I'm going to dissolve into paper. Again, his planes. One thing I think that Wizard does amazing is how every single planeswalker planeswalks differently. That is so fucking cool.
Yeah.
But yeah. What do you think of him?
I think he was a little bit sort of close no cigar in terms of what they had him do. I think the writing, again, this is the whole thing. The bits with him in it, I thought the writing was really good. I quite like his pantomime villainness. Some people didn't. I know I was a lot on lots of different discords that I'm on with their Vorthos and lore sections, found that the sort of pantomime villain aspect of him was maybe a little bit played out, but like the dude's like a literal devil man. Like I don't know how else you can play him. he's literally a mustache twirling devil. Like you can't get past it. So I quite like the fact that they lent into it. I sort of like the idea as well that there was no like final showdown between Kaya and Tybalt. It was like there was a little skirmish. He did what he needed to do and he pissed off. Like I think that was kind of cool. It was just a little bit, I think, like we were going to see more of his machinations in action as we wanted to see it. Like we got a little bit on Knotsfold of him rousing up the trolls,
as it were.
And then we see him afar rousing up the demons, but it's like we don't actually hear him even talking or sort of anything like that. Whereas things like the trailer or the little sort of preview trailer with him in, where he's in like an abstract representation of the realms, which isn't meant to be necessarily like a literal rip from the story, which I understand, but it's like he was more impassioned in that. We got more of his kind of motivations in that than we did really even in his saga story.
Yeah, for sure.
And I just, yeah,
His
like,
agency was severely lacking, I think. That's
yeah, a
the one thing
little
I
bit.
didn't like, his
Yeah.
agency, yeah.
So I like Tybalt. I like his characterization as being like a bit more sort of pantomiming. I think it's fine, especially
Mm.
because some big bads in the multiverse are very dour and very sort of like full on. Like Bolus was a bit pantomimey, but he was also quite
God,
full on and
he was the whole
terrifying.
fucking theatre. He was every aspect of it, yeah.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I like him. I like the fact that Tybalt is just he's just kind of bounces around and does this, that, and the other. I'm very intrigued to see whether he will become the new Tezzeret with this kind of little Phyrexian seed in him. Could we see a
Hmm.
Phyrexianized Tybalt?
See, I think Phyrexianized Planeswalker is something I have to be very, very, very careful with, because the idea of Spark and Phyrexian Oil doesn't work. There's always this kind
Sure.
of weird divergence. Obviously, they played around with this with Khan, but he was only back to being a Planeswalker once he was liberated. I think if anyone we're going to see first will be Tezzeret. I think Tezzeret might be the next, like, say, mastermind. Again, we'll have to see how the whether he is even involved with him. I think it'd be a massive miss if he wasn't.
Ooh, Tezzeret, he's the master of metal. Therefore, does that make him
Yes.
the master of
Well, this
Phyrexians?
is the thing, and if you
Ooh.
think about the first time we see Tezzeret as a bad guy in Tezzeret Agent of Bolus, he's got this kind of red kind of quality to his magic. And what was the color of the portal that Vorinclex was talking into? Was it red? Oh,
Mm.
it was, wasn't it? And it didn't sound like. I think she would have made a point in the story. I don't know, unless it was deliberately ambiguous to make it not sound like it was a female character or a male character, or whatever. But I feel like it's more likely to be that Tezzeret's got his fingers in a lot of pies, and he's managing to twist. Tybalt seems the kind of person it's very easy to twist the knife on, and all he had to do was have someone sneak up to him and go, well, now you've got the oil in you. That's the thing. This is the cool thing. Like, there's so much little bits of speculation. I'm kind of glad they prologued and epilogued with Vorinclex, because it would have ruined the whole story to have it only focused on that. I don't know if it would have worked as a side story. It would have been very distracting if they'd isolated the Kaldheim story and the Kaya Vorinclex story separately. I don't think it would have worked. But there is a lot of little bits now that we go, ooh, who maybe, and I do like this idea of this League of Doom kind of thing going on. And Tybalt clearly wasn't doing this all off his own back. Clearly all we had to do was just spark something a little bit, cause a distraction, so Vorinclex could get the Tyrite elixir. Which, by the way, were you really? It was kind of almost like at the end of a horror film, of where, like, Phyrexians with Tyrite elixir. That can't be good though, right? Because they use Tyrite to make the sword that splits between realms, and the Planeswalker.
Yeah.
This isn't going to be good. This is all going to get really fucked up, and that's great. I love it. This is what the Phyrexians should do. They should make you go, "Oh shit, nothing's going to be the same again." Kind of feeling.
Yeah.
So
I
yeah,
liked it. I
he's
liked it.
definitely not the top of the pile by any way, shape, or form. I think it's a shame that he wasn't as prestigious, I think, as he could have maybe been. Again, it was a little bit flash in the pan for him, but again, I don't know how else you could have handled that. I think maybe the only thing I wished is he hadn't been under duress to instigate the chaos, because he's the kind of person who wants a bit of chaos anyway. And I think
Sure.
maybe it would have been nice to see him try and instigate and then come across Vorinclex, and Vorinclex goes, oh no, I've got grander plans. Maybe something along those lines. But again, we'll see.
Interesting.
I guess we'll see that perspective from the other direction over the next, maybe not this year, but next year. Who knows?
Sure. No, I don't think it'll be this year. I think moving forwards, I think this set of stories I really hope we'll see some more of it in Strixhaven, small little droplets.
Yeah.
I wonder if they'll give it a break for either D&D or Innistrad. It would be a little bit, maybe for both, because Innistrad, it's a plane on the mend as far as we can kind of tell, or at least it should be a plane on the mend.
Leave
by
it
this
alone
point.
for a bit, right?
Maybe just leave it alone for a bit.
Let the werewolves kind of come back to their normality. Let the vampires have a nice wedding. Like, just leave it be. Don't you dare bust out Emrakul and have a Phyrexianized Eldrazi. For God's sake, wizards, calm down. That's I think my threat, and that's I think it's the worry, is that I liked the setup for the moon and having an Eldrazi in it within a plane that already kind of has horrors. I think that's really, really, really cool. Again, don't muddy too many of your enemies across each other. Like Nicobolas specifically was very separate from the Phyrexians or the Eldrazi. Okay, he kind of orchestrated the Eldrazi's release, but thankfully then Wizards as a story team kind of divorced the two, which I think was smart. You know, you want to isolate your threats. You don't want to pile them all in together, otherwise they all get knocked out in one fell swoop, and then where the fuck do you go? So I think D&D, the D&D block especially, they won't do this. It'll be kept separate. I think it'll be isolated, which is good, because then it'll give us some time to forget about it a little bit before. I mean, I feel like the Phyrexian Train should be a long time running in, you know.
Oh yeah, no, this will be the next big story arc, I think, which is a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we haven't really touched much on the side stories. I don't think we really have time to now. I'm just going to say very quickly that Miguel Lopez has returned. So he did a couple of side stories for Zendikar, and he was someone who we really enjoyed. And he was back for Direction, Purpose, Honor, and Glory, which is the Istval story in the side stories, and it is honestly some of the best writing and the best storytelling in a kind of microcosm that we've had for a long time in Magic. And I'm a big sort of like advocate for a lot of the writing. Some of it's obviously not great, but a lot of it's very good. But this specific story, you wouldn't necessarily need to know too much about the plane or about Magic in general, and it reads just like a fantastic short fantasy story. So go and do that. Nico Aris, I think we might need to talk about them in a later episode specifically, because there's so much going on with that Planeswalker, which I absolutely love. Setsu Azumi is the author for the two stories, Known Which Way the Wind is Blowing and Aim Through the Target, which are the two stories featuring Nico Aris and the Valkyries. So their story is very cool, and it's a very interesting idea for a Planeswalker in terms of their abilities and their personal journey before sparking into a Planeswalker. So very, very cool. So do go check those out. Yeah, interesting. A bit bittersweet, which seems unfair. I think in general, I really loved these stories. So it's a little bit misrepresentative to end on a slightly bittersweet note. But I think that's just because, like, well, we're nitpickers, isn't we? We're bloody nitpickers.
Yeah, it was interesting. It kind of started like this horror theme. It finished. The epilogue was straight out of a horror film. I think this amazing point of view from Essica, kind of like not knowing how, couldn't raise her arms, couldn't get out any noise beyond a gurgle. That was really cool. The war in the middle of it kind of fitted into four stories. Was maybe a bit mishandled. I still don't think it was overall a bad thing in any way, shape, or form. I'm still very happy to see this going forwards. I just think this set was just impossible. Like again, from a mechanical point of view, from a story point of view, it was just so dense. It's impossible to do everything justice. You know, so well done with what they've done. But yeah, like it was always going to be difficult to get everything in and hit every nail perfectly.
Yeah, for sure. I hope we return to Kaldheim and kind of flesh everything out.
Yeah.
All right, guys. If you want to talk to us more about the story or about anything to do with Kaldheim, because this is the last of our official Kaldheim episodes, you can hit us up on social media. You can hit us up on Twitter at mtflavouring. Emails go to mtflavouring@gmail.com. My personal email is at AndyManFace. Nathan's, yours is?
At the Fox in the Moon.
I'm going to ask you guys to do something that I've never asked of you, I don't think, and that is if you are on iTunes or Apple Podcasts, or indeed anything which requires reviews or star ratings, give us 5 stars and a glowing review, please. It really does help. It's something I've never really called to action for you guys, or at least I don't think I have. We're now on 59 episodes, maybe I've done it once, twice. Because it's not something I personally put stock in terms of us feeling good about our show, but algorithms don't work like people. So if we could boost some algorithm stuff, that would be great. Also, if you could go hit us up on YouTube, do the old subscribe button and check out some of our videos. We're having a lot of fun there. Yeah, that would be wonderful. But really, we kind of want to see you on social media, because that means we actually get to interact with you, which is great. MT Flavouring. Nathan, any final words about Kaldheim?
No, not at all. No, I think, I mean, not without going to another diatribe. So no, we're good. We're good.
Excellent. I love this plane.
Yeah.
Reading those stories.
Yeah, very cool.
And the whole flow of storytelling and the reverence characters had for one another. Like, we didn't talk about it because we didn't have time, but the Nico Aris stories, the relationship between Nico Aris and Gel, who is the sort of kind of mystic that is sort of looking after Nico, was really, really well handled, and just a really nice little relationship between two characters that had only known each other a couple of weeks, and it just kind of embodied a lot of what Kaldheim is about for me. So yes, I really love this plane, and I hope you come back.
Yeah, thank God they haven't fucked up, so we can't not come back. You know, it's still standing. Yes. It's still good. There's still stuff to go back to as well, which is quite nice.
Yeah, we'll come back for the Ragnarok story time a different time. All right, guys. Other than that, all that remains for me to say is thank you so much for listening. This has been magic flavoring.
We'll see you soon.